The radio crackled, spitting out static instead of the familiar comfort of late-night jazz. Sarah tapped the dial, frustration mounting as the only response was a high-pitched whine. She glanced at the clock on the dashboard, almost midnight. "Great," she muttered. "Just perfect." The highway stretched ahead, an endless black ribbon under the pale glow of the moon. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of her tires on the asphalt. Then she heard it, a whisper, faint and chilling, carried on the breeze. It seemed to slither from the shadows at the edge of her vision. "Turn back." Sarah shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. "Just the wind," she murmured, trying to convince herself. But the hair on the back of her neck stood on end. She had been driving for hours, eager to put miles between herself and the city, and a wrong turn had led her to this desolate stretch of highway. Now she wished she had paid more attention to the map. The feeling of unease gnawed at her. She glanced at the GPS, its screen blank. No signal, she sighed, her voice tight with tension. Of course. She gripped the steering wheel, a sudden urge to turn back, to find her way to the familiar lights of the interstate, overwhelming her. The silence returned, heavier this time, pressing down on her like a physical weight. Sarah rolled down the window a crack, hoping to catch a stray signal, a hint of civilization. The air that rushed in was cold and damp, carrying the scent of pine needles and something else. Something metallic like old blood. She quickly rolled the window back up, her heart pounding in her chest. It was just her imagination, she told herself. The isolation was playing tricks on her mind, but deep down a primal fear began to stir. Something wasn't right. Just when her hope was dwindling, a beacon appeared in the distance. A lone gas station, its fluorescent lights casting an unnatural glow in the darkness. The road had been long and winding, and Sarah had been driving for hours, her eyes straining to see through the inky blackness of the night. The sight of the gas station was like a mirage, offering a glimmer of hope in an otherwise desolate landscape. Relief washed over Sarah. Maybe she could get directions, or at least a signal for her phone. Her heart, which had been pounding with anxiety, began to calm as she approached the station. She thought about the last time she had seen another car, or a sign of civilization. It felt like ages ago. The isolation had been suffocating, and the gas station seemed like a lifeline. She pulled into the deserted gas station, the silence even more oppressive here. The only sounds were the hum of the fluorescent lights, and the distant rustling of leaves in the wind. The place looked like it hadn't seen a customer in years, with weeds growing through the cracks in the pavement, and the paint peeling off the walls. As she stepped out of the car, the bell above the door jingled, the sound echoing in the stillness. It was an old-fashioned bell, the kind that seemed out of place in the modern world, adding to the eerie atmosphere. The jingle was almost cheerful, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence that surrounded her. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall man with a gaunt face and eyes that seemed to hold the darkness of the surrounding woods. He wore a tattered uniform, the name tag too faded to read. His movements were slow and deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world. The way he appeared so suddenly made Sarah's heart skip a beat. He moved with an unsettling stillness, his gaze fixed on her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. His eyes were like black holes, absorbing all light and warmth. Sarah felt a chill run through her body, her instincts screaming at her to get back in the car and drive away. But she was rooted to the spot, unable to move, as if the man's gaze had paralyzed her. "Help you?" the man asked, his voice raspy, as if unused for days. Sarah swallowed, trying to ignore the tremor in her own voice. "Hi, yeah," she said. "My phone's dead, and I think I took a wrong turn. Do you know how to get back to the interstate?" The man stared at her for a beat too long, his silence unnerving. Then a slow, chilling smile spread across his face. "You don't want to go that way," he rasped, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "Not tonight." Sarah's stomach clenched. There was something deeply unsettling about this man, about this entire situation. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. just that things happen on these roads at night, the man said, his smile widening. His teeth glinted in the dim light, giving him an almost predatory look. Things people don't talk about. Things that are better left unsaid, he continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He leaned closer, his breath warm and stale on her face. The smell of tobacco and something else, something metallic, made her stomach churn. Best you stay off the roads, little lady. It's not safe. Not for someone like you, he added, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. Sarah took a step back, her hand instinctively reaching for the pepper spray in her purse. Her fingers trembled as they closed around the small canister. Thanks for the warning, she said, her voice strained. She tried to sound confident, but the quiver in her voice betrayed her fear. She turned to go, her heart pounding against her ribs. Each step felt like a mile, the darkness pressing in around her. Wait, the man called after her, his voice suddenly closer. She whirled around, her breath catching in her throat. He was standing right behind her, his face inches from hers. His eyes were dark, almost black, and filled with a cold, calculating menace. You won't get far, he whispered, his eyes burning into hers. His voice was low, almost a growl, and it sent a shiver down her spine. They don't like it when people leave. The woods have a way of keeping those who wander too far, he added, his smile widening into a grin that was anything but friendly. Sarah stumbled back, fear coursing through her veins. She didn't wait to hear another word. She ran to her car, fumbling with the keys, her hands shaking so badly she could barely get the door open. As she slammed the door shut and fumbled with the lock, she could hear the man's laughter echoing in the night, cold and cruel. She threw the car into gear and sped away, the engine roaring in the stillness. She glanced at her phone again, desperately hoping for a signal. Still nothing. She was trapped. Miles stretched on, each one doing little to ease the terror that clawed at her throat. The gas station attendant's words echoed in her mind, fueling her fear. Things happen on these roads at night. Things people don't talk about. She glanced at her fuel gauge. It was nearing empty. Panic swelled in her chest. She had to find a way out of here, and soon. But there was nothing but endless darkness ahead, the road stretching before her like a path to nowhere. Then, she saw it again. The gas station, bathed in the eerie glow of its fluorescent lights. It was as if she had driven in a circle, trapped in some nightmare loop. Desperation gnawed at Sarah's resolve. She couldn't stay on the road, running on fumes and fear. She had to make a choice, turn back or face whatever lurked in the darkness ahead. With a shaky breath, she steered the car towards the gas station. Maybe the attendant was just a harmless eccentric. Maybe she was letting her fear get the best of her. As she pulled up to the pumps, she saw him standing there, shrouded in shadow, his gaze fixed on her approach. He was waiting for her. The bell above the door chimed as she entered the gas station, the sound jarring in the silence. The attendant stood behind the counter, his face unreadable in the dim light. Sarah forced a smile, her heart hammering against her ribs. S1. Back so soon?
Looks like I'm out of options, she said, her voice trembling. Just need enough gas to get me back to the interstate.
The attendant didn't move. He just stood there watching her, his eyes burning into her like hot coals.
There's no going back, he finally said, his voice barely a whisper.
And then everything went dark. The last thing Sarah remembers is the sound of the wind, howling like a banshee, and the feeling of cold, clammy hands closing around her throat. Then, silence. An eerie, suffocating silence that seemed to stretch on forever, enveloping her in a void of darkness. Now, she wakes up in a cold sweat, the nightmare still clinging to her like a shroud. Her breaths come in ragged gasps, and her eyes dart around the room, searching for any sign that it was just a figment of her imagination. Morning light streams through her bedroom window, chasing away the shadows. The familiar warmth of the sun should bring comfort, but today it feels like a cruel reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the light. It was just a dream, she tells herself, her heart still pounding in her chest, but the fear refuses to dissipate. lingering like a ghostly presence in the corners of her mind. But as she reaches for her phone, she sees it. Her hand trembles and a sense of dread washes over her, making her feel as though she's teetering on the edge of an abyss. A single feather, black as night, resting on her pillow. It seems to pulse with a malevolent energy, a tangible reminder of the nightmare that felt all too real. A chill runs down her spine, and she knows deep in her gut that it was more than just a dream. The feather is a harbinger, a sign that the darkness has crossed over into her reality. The wrong turn had led her somewhere she could never truly escape, a place where nightmares and reality blur, and the line between the two is perilously thin. Sarah realizes that the journey has only just begun, and the true horror lies ahead, waiting in the shadows.